What's up, Samurai? We are back with more Trove, and today we're going to be doing a returning guide for players in 2024. There is a lot of topics that we're going to skip over. Pretty much everything from my last returning players guide video, which was in 2022. I'm going to skip over all of those topics, but I'll have a link in the description to that video if you want to know about like delves, U10, Leviathans, world bosses, and crystal gems, and so on and so forth. Instead, this video is going to kind of summarize the most recent years, and I think going forward, I'll probably try my best to have these as like almost a yearly recap, so we do still have 2 years to cover. Now, if you are coming back to Trove, you could sound off in the comments, how long has it been since you came back? Just because I'd be curious to see. There's also going to end up being some topics that I think are important enough that I should just mention, like I'm going to mention right now that we've actually had reworks to pretty much all of the classes in the game, Gunslinger being the most recent. And maybe it's been a long enough time that you don't know about the Bard and the new Solarian class, which is the newest class. He also ended up coming with the Sundered Uplands biome, which includes the new 5-star dungeons that endgame players basically keep grinding in U10 or U11 because these dungeons are wave defense and they are technically infinite. Eventually they scale too high that players just can't complete them anymore though. But a huge bulk of the newer content is just going to end up being right in here in the hub area because there's a couple new professions, obviously the new crystal gear and Gearcrafter Vaults and so on and so forth. But before we get into that, let's talk about the marketplace. So ignore the prices of everything in the market because right now we're dealing with flux dupers and stuff. Devs are trying to combat it. But basically what's going on with the market is they completely overhauled the UI in a fantastic way, wherein if you try to sell something, let me just put these right here, it'll show the average lowest cost, the overall average, and then the average highest costs. That's not taking into account whether an item is like grouped together, but it's really, really nice and intuitive now that it actually ends up showing all of that feedback to the player immediately. However, it does also have a listing fee, and if the item sells, it also takes a cut. Yes, that's right. Taxes are in Trove right now. And unlike every other video game that I've played that has had taxes, these taxes are pointless because it's basically just cycling the flux out of the in-game economy. Now, I think that relative to what's going on right now with the flux duping, this was the developers' weird way of trying to deal with dupers. But the problem is that they don't seem to realize the few people that actually did dupe back in the day, you know, more recent, it's been a big problem because of other issues that I've talked about in other videos. But long story short, how the heck was taxes going to end up impacting flux duping? Most of all, it's just going to impact the average player, right? So nobody likes the taxes. Everyone hated it when they first announced it, but devs didn't care. They just implemented it anyways. There's also titles added into the game, player titles. I can't equip them right now because I've got like a different UI going on right now, and a lot of things are very, very broken in the game at the moment, but we'll, you know, never mind any of that. I think a lot of aspects of the game are disabled right now as they try to fix the flux duping, which kind of sucks. But yeah, so let me see if I can find somebody who's got like a title. There we go. See this guy with a really, really long name? He's got like his username and then a bunch of different titles inside his username. It's kind of annoying for trying to figure out like what a player's name is, but at least it doesn't show the titles in chat. It's just for vanity. It doesn't really do anything other than that. There's other videos that I have talking about titles though. So if we go down here to where Fluxion is, there's a couple new merchants. There's Pinzo, which he's just for flux drain. These items are worthless and barely do anything. And then Fluxion himself, I hate this guy, but I think he's a necessary evil. Basically, every week you have the option of voting on what Fluxion will end up having the following week, and then you can buy those items from him for dragon coins. It's kind of a way that players can pick and choose items that he has, like Luxion, right? Because he's basically got Luxion's pool of items, but I just don't like his implementation, especially because it's so ridiculously expensive in terms of dragon coins. Then there's also going to end up being the Curio Merchant. This guy I also hate. I like the idea of him, but I hate his implementation because basically instead of spending like 20 bucks to get like a store pack that gives you a bunch of costumes and mounts, this guy just takes items that would otherwise be in a pack and spreads them thin. It's like taking a piece of butter and trying to spread it over a huge, massive piece of bread. Like, it's just, there's no flavor to it. It's just trying to scam you. So unfortunately, you know, these mounts in particular at the moment, these would be 1,000 credits each. And buying 2 of these mounts would essentially be the same cost as most packs in the game that would include upwards of 3 mounts, right? So it's just, it's kind of weird. Now, the other thing too, as if it didn't add insult to injury, is as he cycles these items out, you gotta buy like 4 or 5 of these items on the left side here in order to unlock this last item. So mastery farmers are kind of screwed. A lot of times I'll just skip over these items unless it's something that I think is cool or worthwhile, like player costumes or mounts in this case. So Bomber Season 3 ended up coming out, and with it we've got the Volatile Bounder, which is a mount where if you use your attack button, it shoots you up the equivalent of 10 player jumps. But we also ended up having the Cosmic Dragon added into the game finally, and this dragon was extremely expensive to craft at first, but now it's actually not that bad. So if you look at the crafting recipe, it's still very expensive, and I don't know why it takes 3 dragon eggs. It's just because the devs are stupid. But the crystalline cores are particularly easy to get, and we'll talk about why later because it's got to do with the gear crafting. But this dragon, the reason I'm bundling it up with Bomber Season 3 is because he actually gives you a high jump and slow fall effect that ultimately is more efficient than Volatile Bounder, but I just don't like it as much because I like being able to just instantly start flying from Volatile Bounder with my player wings instead of dragon flight. So another thing that's actually really cool is they ended up adding a skill tree to Trove. It doesn't really give you that much options in terms of your builds and stuff like that, but yeah, you just gather this new time-gated astro focus resource, whatever, and then you can end up maxing out this skill tree. So there's a couple different options that you can end up going towards. I like this build, quote unquote, that I have right now is movement speed, light, and physical damage. If I wanted to respec into magic, I think it would end up being down here. Yeah, there's the extra magic damage. But yeah, there's a lot of different items you can get out of here. So essentially what you're gonna try and do, you can respec this. So you're going to go down each and every single one of the skill trees so that you can ultimately end up unlocking these items, which I already have them all unlocked anyways. So yeah, I have videos that highlight all of them as well. But it's very annoying, and it's very, very expensive for your qubits because the keys are going to be very, very expensive. Yeah, there it is. The Constellation key, 1,300 qubits each. There's so many things in this game that require qubits now. It's actually insane. But if we end up going into the basement of that building, there is also going to end up being Fishing 2.0, which has its own skill tree. And I haven't really touched most of this because, frankly speaking, I already got my 15K fishing badge years ago, and I have no desire to get into the new fishing. Essentially, there's going to end up being these little fish ponds. Not that. There's these little fish ponds that you can find out in the world. There's mods that make it a lot better on PC. But yeah, you just fish in those areas, and then you have to get certain fishing lines and fishing rods and stuff in order to end up getting the better fish and get all these different items to end up giving you, you know, various resources so that you can get more things in the skill tree. It's a whole thing. I don't really have a video talking about Fishing 2.0 that much because, again, it's just, fishing is so boring to me, I just couldn't be bothered. However, it does end up giving you the canned fish, which as far as I know is the best food item in the game, which food items are just like a passive item that is now called auto use, because there's also going to end up being a couple new professions. So mysticism, which these boxes are worthless. Check out my video highlighting them. This profession sucks because all it does is gives you a bunch of items that you can put in your auto use slot. All of these are worthless in comparison to food items, so I don't know why they even exist, and they're very expensive as well in terms of the resource cost. But then there's also going to end up being potions, which are essentially just the same items. It does give you mastery though. And then there's a bunch of collectible items. So again, just for mastery. The point of this is basically there's going to end up being these random little mana things in the overworld that you can interact with. And then there's also going to end up being specific elemental ones from elemental worlds, as well as unique new enemies that you can find called mana beasts that essentially, if you kill them, they can generate as a bigger creature. And then when you kill that creature, you'll end up gaining some more of the mana itself, which the thing that's kind of dumb is the mana, you have a limited amount that you can store. Thus, you have to get mana maximizers, which you can just find from elite mobs and very, very easily get the maximum amount of mana that you can store. And then like me, once you've got the profession done, outside of getting these items, eventually, I don't really have any rush to get them. I don't care. Once I get all those items, there is literally no reason for this profession to exist because unfortunately, the items in it are so worthless. There's no reason that I would ever end up touching it outside of getting the mastery. But as if that wasn't bad enough, there's also going to end up being this station right here, which is going to end up being the martial arts profession. So there's karma in the game now, which not to be confused with the karma of opening boxes and stuff. Instead, this is going to end up being positive karma, which you can get from doing quests for this guy, which is very expensive for your flux. But there's also going to end up being these weeds that you can find in various biomes that you just go and interact with, and it gives you like some positive karma each, right? But then there's also going to end up being negative karma. So if you compost trophies, it'll end up giving you, you can see right here, it's going to give me fertilizer and then that little skull icon. And then if I end up going to, where the heck is it? Yeah, the Path of Suffering, you can see that I can actually convert these soul tangles and various other resources into negative karma. And the only reason that's important is because as you end up going through this profession, various items will end up costing a certain amount of positive karma and a certain amount of negative karma. Once again, similar to the Mystic Arts, once you get all of these items out of this profession, there is no reason to ever touch it again. And then of course, the most recent profession that was added into the game is Gearcrafting, which actually has a huge positive impact on the game as a whole because gear is so much easier to obtain now. Not because of the gear crafting itself, which, you know, we'll talk about that, but most of all because of the Gearcrafting Vaults, which we'll get into in a moment. So this guy, you know, I've already got my Gearcrafter's guide and so on and so forth, but basically there's going to end up being all these various resources you can get from him so that you can slowly advance through the profession and eventually be able to craft crystal gear. But then once you get the profession maxed out, you can go into this thing right here, and it's essentially another small skill tree. You can't max this out. You can get various things from it, but you won't be able to get it like completely and utterly maxed out like everything. All it really does is gives you very, very minuscule odds of getting more Gearcrafter Vaults from various aspects of the game. But most importantly, this third tab right here will allow you to craft Crystal 4 gear with a very, very rare chance of it actually being converted and being a Crystal 5. Now, of course, there's going to end up being some cash shop oriented stuff related to it, like a Forge Enhancer, which enhances the gear that you end up getting for the next 3 minutes and so on and so forth. I don't know. And then there's going to be these Vault Magnets, which end up increasing the amount of Gearcrafter Vaults you end up getting from dungeons and stuff. So essentially the new meta of the game is just grinding dungeons. The best places that you can do it is if you're solo, you go to U6, because in U6, there's elite mobs. The enemies will end up guaranteeing you Gearcrafter Vaults. But if you're not solo and going into U6, instead you're going to end up going into U10 or U11 Prime Worlds, and you're going to end up going for Sundered Uplands 5-star dungeons. But if you have a large group of people, those are going to end up being very, very efficient because you can just sit there and be AFK the whole time. And Gearcrafter Vaults are these new boxes, which I've already got plenty of videos talking about. In short summary, once you end up getting your profession maxed out and have your class at a certain power rank, you can get up to Crystal 4 and even Crystal 5 out of these boxes. So it's very, very random. You know, I've opened like a couple thousand of these and I still haven't gotten a Crystal 5. Trying to think if there was anything else that was added into the game more recently. I mean, I guess on top of all of the classes getting their reworks, you know, the Shadow Hunter is one of the most apparent ones that I get a lot of questions about, because people are always like, how are you moving so fast? When you roll, you seem to get a movement speed boost and stuff, which again, I've got other videos that go into more detail with that. Today's video is specifically trying to focus on just giving you a quick summary of everything. And then if you want to dig deep, you can with my other videos. But yeah, otherwise, smash like, sub for more, buy the merch if you want to support the channel, and have a wonderful day.